Why do we love our virtual pets so much? A craze swept over the kids and teens of the late 90s that changed the way we interacted with machines forever. Tamagotchi were tiny eating, sleeping, and pooping machines that kids could carry around in their pockets. As this may suggest, they required not only daily, but hourly observation. And if you failed to take care of your virtual pet, it died and was sent up to heaven, or wherever it is that pixels go to die. Refusing to let their pixel pets wither, some kids grew so attached that they risked getting expelled from school just to keep their virtual pet alive. In Japan, Tamagotchi exceeded even the popularity of real pets, since not many people can afford space for non-virtual companions. For the first time, millions of people were developing emotional attachments to machines and treating them like living beings.
My Tamagotchi died.
Psychologists dub the phenomenon the Tamagotchi effect, which describes our tendency to form relationships with machines and robots that appear responsive and sensitive to the user's interactions. The Tamagotchi effect can happen with anything from a virtual pet to a smart toothbrush. The user begins to see the software's behavior as an emotional response rather than a program. I mean, just look at people's love-hate relationship with their computers. And for those wondering, this is different from something like the Turing test, which tests the machine's ability to exhibit human behavior and response. With the Tamagotchi effect, the machines don't have to be like us to warrant our love and affection. We get emotionally involved with software when it's interactive, which means that games are a natural breeding ground for the Tamagotchi effect. Whether it's the Call of Duty Ghost dog, arguably the most redeemable quality in the game, or Cortana in Halo, we love these bits of programming, whether or not they reveal themselves to be synthetic. Portal's companion cube even shows that we don't really need all that much in return in order to develop attachments to inanimate lines of coding. We just need some hearts, a box, and that human need for love. Oh, and maybe complete isolation from the outside world and veiled threats of a murderous robot overlord, but
this next
that's
test
splitting
involves
hairs.
turrets. You remember them, right? They're the pale spherical things that are full of bullets. Oh wait, that's you in 5 seconds.
Human beings are so ready to see machines as sentient beings, in fact, that even creepy and clearly robotic monstrosities like Furby are enough to make our hearts flutter. So why does this happen? When we talked to computer scientist Alex Petlin from MIT, he told us that when machines give us certain signals, we're bound to connect with them on an intimate level. Responsiveness, mimicry, and reactivity are all universal social signals human beings rely on to judge the aliveness of things. These signals are so embedded in our psychology, in fact, that we find it hard to disassociate the signal from humanity, even when it's just programmed pixels on a screen. And it's not just kids who got fooled into empathizing with a bunch of wires and code either. The Washington Post reported on one military colonel who couldn't bear to watch a robot designed to set off landmines crawl and struggle after detonation, even though that's its job. Human beings are so vulnerable to the emotions of robots that roboticists are even discussing a need for legal regulation when it comes to things like virtual pets, to protect people from companies who might manipulate that deep attachment for monetary gain. A seemingly simple machine like the Tamagotchi was enough to touch the hearts of 76 million kids, and since then, technology has only made the virtual pet more lovable and lifelike. Last June, Japanese company SoftBank released Pepper, the first emotionally intelligent robot, programmed to read, respond, and even develop its own feelings. Pepper is just one example of the increasingly blurred lines between simulated and real emotions. It's designed to help people in social situations and bring happiness to its human companion, which sounds an awful lot like what cats and dogs do for us now. Unsurprisingly, Pepper sold out in seconds. And who are we to say that Pepper's emotions transmitted by wires and binary code are any less legitimate than our own, which are communicated by a neurological network of pathways and receptors? As the creator of Furby posited to the Radiolab team, there's virtually no difference between the program cries of a Furby and our own feelings, besides complexity. What's clear is that the interactive arts, including games, will be at the forefront of how we develop emotional relationships to machines. Considering our progress already, it's not hard to envision a world where the virtual pet could become almost indistinguishable from the flesh and blood one. But what do you think? Can a virtual pet ever replace Lassie? And have you ever had an emotional connection to an animal in a game? Hash it out in the comments, and if you like what you saw, please subscribe. I'll see you next week. Last week we talked about why the Mushroom Kingdom is so weird and got a lot of amazing answers. Let's see what you had to say. Wednesday Serial, the commenter, not the episode, says that Mario's weird, but so are other games like Zelda and Mega Man. So while I agree with you about sort of the maybe relative weirdness of those other games, I think the difference between Mario and those other games is how much Nintendo's development team was willing to eschew so much common sense and seeming rationality so we could experience this other way of thinking, the logic of game design. So the floating question blocks are a great example. It makes no sense, obviously, in the real world for a metal block to be suspended in midair, yet in the world of Mario, this feels like entirely consistent. Not only that, it just feels like super right to, pop it. So anyway, Nintendo's thinking around this, I think, is entirely consistent in this universe that they've built, and that's what I find so fascinating. And Bezard shed some light on the Goombas, for whom I didn't really have a good answer for in the video. So, similar to how the turtles were given wings in order to conserve memory, instead of creating a totally different enemy, they say that the Goomba was a crafty reconfiguration by Nintendo of the mushroom sprite, which is really crafty. That's really super interesting. I did not know that. Also, a bunch of others of you pointed out that in Japanese, Goomba translates to chestnut guy, which, means that they're little chestnuts walking around with their little shoes, which is, I guess, an explanation, but still totally nuts.